Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on which part of the country you're in. I'm Poppy Behrens, publisher at Minico, and we'd like to welcome you to the Mini Storage Messenger Self-Storage webinar series. This is one of several informative webinars planned for self-storage owners, operators, managers, investors, developers, and other industry professionals. Today's webinar, Maximizing Income by Not Leaving Money on the Table, Part 1, is the first of a two-part series sponsored by District Manager. Our presenter is Paul Darden, who for nearly 30 years has been involved in buying, selling, owning, developing, managing, and auditing hundreds of self-storage facilities. Based on years of his deep-rooted experience and feedback from peers in the self-storage industry, Paul has developed the criteria, thresholds, algorithms underlying the District Manager software. Since its first release in early 2010, District Manager has become a favorite with hundreds of clients across the United States and Australia. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. This year marks the 32nd anniversary of the Mini Storage Messenger, providing the self-storage industry with in-depth news and information. We also publish a variety of other self-storage data sources, such as those that you see listed on your screen. For more information, we invite you to visit ministoragemessenger.com, the information destination for self-storage. During today's webinar, we invite you to submit your questions. To do so, simply type your question in the question area and click Send. Depending on the question, we will answer it either privately or to the entire group, and while we'll try to answer as many as we can during the Q&A period at the end of the webinar, those that cannot be answered due to time constraints will be answered by Paul by way of email once the webinar has concluded. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on demand from our archives at ministoragemessenger.com. Today's presentation should run about 45 minutes with the remainder of the hour open to your questions and answers. And now it's my distinct privilege to turn the presentation over to Paul.
Poppy, I'd like to thank you and Keith for allowing us to share this information with your viewers. And I'm going to show my screen now and minimize. Okay, I thank everyone for attending today, and wanted to share with you what we've learned over the last several years in the self-storage industry. One of the things that we found that's happened, and now there we go, is that since 2008, we've been sort of at a race to the bottom because of the economic times. There was excessive discounting and concessions that were going on, and by doing that, it's been, I might say too, for the benefit of owners, that your regional managers and district managers, it's just virtually impossible to track all of this because there's such a high volume of tenants that receive these discounts and concessions. And so it's understandable. We found this problem ourselves, and in doing it, we realized the only way we were going to be able to analyze this properly was to design a computer program, which we did, called District Manager. And I'm going to be going back and forth from a PowerPoint presentation to the examples on District Manager, and I'm going to show you the various techniques that any of you can use with simply exporting your data out into spreadsheets, and you can manipulate the data in a similar type of way in order to find money that we found is being left on the table. Now, the areas that where the money is being left on the table are basically three major areas. Discounts, which I'm going to use for definition today, those rates that are below standard. There are many times those discounts, you could be giving discounts on units that are at least 100% occupied, or you're about to run out of. And if you stop and think, why would you continue? And some stores have been doing it for years, giving discounts to people when they no longer have a particular unit size available, when they could easily terminate that discount and or raise the rates on those particular units. So one of the key functions is that we must look at each unit size and type in order to determine what is the best way to eliminate those discounts and what maybe should be an increase in the standard rates. The second major area is concessions, and concessions typically are at move-in or special discounts that are for a fixed period of time, whether it's first month free, second month free, 2 months off at half off, or something like that. So we're going to look at concessions, and then the final area we're going to look at are fees and rents that are waived or deleted by the managers. There are several areas that the fees, we are going to look at favorites that managers that might be have favorite tenants and giving away excessive late fees, for example, waiving those. Or it also implies where there could be potential theft. Now, going to discounts, that's the first major one. You can typically find between $2,000 and $10,000 per month in discounts that can typically be recovered after this 2008 downturn. And I will show you the technique on how you can go about doing it. First, you want to locate the units that are at least 100% occupied or that are below the market standard rates by exporting them to a spreadsheet and then sorting them. And once you've done that, you want to look at each of your unit sizes and types. Sort them by that. And I'll give you an example here in just a second when we switch over to the District Manager software. After you've done that, you want to locate units that are very well occupied, like 100% occupied units, or ones that you only have vacancies of just a handful of vacancies, and you're going to run out of in the next month or so. Why would you continue to give a big discount on that? Finally, you need to review the date that the tenant has paid through so that you can set the date that you want to implement the new rate increase. And to do that, you might want to also, prior to determine your leasing history for each size and unit type so that you'll know from, let's say, the experience of last year or the last couple of years, how many units of that particular size and type you're going to lease in the next given month, maybe 2 or 3 months. And finally, you will have to determine your rent increase for each size and type such that you do not want to lose your tenant. We all recognize that it's hard to make up that entire month's rent that you might lose if a person moves out. But if you do the previous activity of checking on the leasing history, you may find that you have 6 or 7 other tenants that may be lined up ready to take that unit. So it's a situation where you can say, I'll make a judgment call that if he moves out, I'm not worried because I know I'm going to release that unit almost immediately. Let's go to an actual example, and you'll have to bear with me just a little bit as I switch back and forth from the program. I'm going to give you an example. One of our stores is an actual case history to show you how this happens and how we operate. This is a store that was developed in Little Rock, Arkansas. This was the first month of activity, and you can see our leasing activity. We were doing so well that we built a second phase, and then we continued on. And then when we got up to about 2008, we saw that it looked like we probably had tended to stabilize, or at least that's what appeared to be in the market, and we sort of held constant there. But using our efforts and knowing that we could get better, we went on and pushed it on up in occupancy and income, and I'm going to switch now back over to a different chart to show you what happens and why this is so important. When we look at what we did in discounting during that time frame, this is the history of the dollar amounts each month that we were giving away in discounting. And we were really, really surprised when we saw that it had gotten up to over $300,000 in discounting of money that we had given away in order to get to that 85% occupancy. So we started working on cutting that down manually, and in 2009 we decided to write the program because there were thousands of tenants of all of our stores where we were having this discounting problem and try to keep track of it. And we completed the program and began implementing it on this particular store on January of 2010, where we were just at over $6,000 a month. And we have brought the discounts down, as you can see, to less than $1,000 into this time frame right now. What you can see, we've recently increased our discounting for another reason, which I'll get to in later on. We boosted our discounting because we wanted to boost our occupancy up, and our goal is to hit before the end of the summer is 100% occupancy at this store. Now, did that affect our income? I'll show you what's happened. Oops, excuse me. Get out of that. I want to go to a chart showing the income itself. And I want to go to the entire history. And as you can see, 2008, we built up to where we were stabilizing. It looked like at about $55,000. Right now, we've gone on up to where we're all consistently doing over $60,000. And by the end of the year, we hope to be at about $70,000. So in 2008, we were at about $55,000, yet by using these techniques in this software, we were able to go on and boosted up to close to $70,000 a month, or an increase of $15,000 a month in income. And mainly that was eliminating discounts, and in addition changing our concession plans, and then finally locating areas where the managers were giving excessive fees and round away where they shouldn't be, and cutting back on that. As I mentioned before, we'll get into the discounting and go specifically to discounts themselves. Let me alt-tab again, and I'm going to go over to how you do this and give you a particular chart, and that is the current tenant rent discounts. And I'm going to configure this to where I'm only going to show the tenants that are in units that are at least 80% occupied or more, or if there's less than 3 units available, and tenants that hadn't had a rent increase in over 180 days. And when I do that, this is the type of spreadsheet when you download your information and export it out to a spreadsheet you want to create, where we've got the tenant name, the unit size, the type of unit that it is, the current occupancy of that, and how many are available, or our vacancies, our standard rate, our actual rate, our discount, the total of discounts that we've given away so far, and this second part of that column shows the number of times we've given it away, the date they first started leasing with us, the date that they're paid through, the number of days since their last rent increase, so I'm going to sort by that by clicking on it. Then we show the scheduled ones that we have recently scheduled for rent increases, mainly on August 1st, which we have about $918 scheduled right now to increase. If we look at the columns that are important here, what it says is I have right now at the bottom of this column $1.9 thousand a month that I could potentially increase of tenants that are below the standard rate, and that we're about to run out of those units in that particular size. For example, if you go to now group occupancy, here are units where I have no units available. As you can see, 0 in there. They're 100% occupied, and they're different size types of units and so forth. And you can see the dollar amounts that I'm giving away. It could be anywhere from $2 to $10, and there's several of them that are $12. So those are the ones that I want to go in and say, why would I possibly want to continue to give discounts? Some of which you can see in the one under total discounts that there could be over $1,000 of discounting that I've done for those particular tenants over the years, and just they've slipped through the cracks. And it's because, as I said, it's not the fault of your regional or district managers. It's just there's thousands of tenants where this can fall through the cracks. Once we sort of analyze which tenants that we want to by looking at the amount of discounting that's going on, and let me minimize that, we go over and we start deciding when are we going to be able to schedule them. So we look at the days that they're paid through, and we'll project out a period based on your state law as to what time frame. It may be a 30-day notice. In our case, on this particular facility, it's on a first of the month instead of an anniversary, but you would go through and pick out and schedule your time frames that you could implement these, and then what your new rate would be, and then the amount of increase itself. And the so that's, then you can sort of see that you can start catching up with, like in this case in August, we're going to catch up about $900 worth of that 1,900 possible available, and then each month you do this. If you're on anniversary, for example, what you typically want to do is look at these kind of reports at least twice a month, because every day new people are rolling on that might be your minimum time frame. For example, when we filtered, we said we only want to see people that are, example, only haven't had a rate increase in 180 days. Let's just change that and say some people say I only want to do it for a 1 year minimum time frame. And if we did that, then it'll instantly calculate and say, all right, we have $705 worth of rent increases we could do for those people that have had a rent increase in 1 year. So those are the types of things that you want to look for and see how much you can increase the rate there on those particular ones. But that's money that is being left on the table that just there's very little reason. Now, we also, if you'll notice, if I go down the page here to some of the subsequent pages, we'll get to units. There's, for example, 1 and 2 units that are available. I know I'm going to run out of those this month because I'm going to lease those particular sizes. Now, one of the things you can do is prepare a report, as I suggested earlier, that will go under unit analysis, and this is our lease activity, for example, based on each unit size and type. And I might stress at this point that this is the way we need to be looking at our facilities. It's on a per unit basis, not on the overall facility occupancy, because you could be at 50% occupied, but on certain sizes, you'd run out of those units. So you can actually implement this well into your lease-up period. And what I do is I typically go back and look at the last year, and I can see of each size and type how many units I expect to lease based on the history of the previous leasing. And that gives me that particular report, and one other that we've created, for example, is the one particular report under rent analysis shows me how long each tenant typically stays in each size unit and how long does it take to release that. And I'll get to one of those reports right here. The stay and release. And so we've created the same unit mix and types of units, the number of units, and how many we have vacant. We created a column that says this is the average length of stay for each of those particular sizes. And then how long does it typically take us to release those units? Well, knowing that information gives you a certain degree of confidence of saying, okay, I can raise this person more than $5. And sort of the question comes up of how much you can raise the tenant. And that's going to be a judgment based on your experience in your market. For example, in the dense urban areas, typically, and if you have average household incomes that are higher, the more that you can raise. If you're in rural areas and the average household income might be lower, then typically you can't raise quite as much. In our urban areas, just anecdotally, I can tell you that we've typically been able to raise $5 or $6 without any real resistance from the tenants at that point, and up to a total of about $20. So over a period of time, about the third increase, we start to see some potential move-outs at that point. But that will vary for each location that you have, and not even, like I said, based on the economics, the demographics of the area, as well as the density of the area, will determine that amount that you can do. But we use these types of charts in order to be able to give us a little comfort as to saying, yes, we know that we can quickly release that unit, and you might also want to look at the waiting list that you have available at the time too. The next area that we'd like to look at is concessions. So we did an analysis of our concession plans. At this particular location, this represents all the different types of concession plans that we've done over the years at this particular store, and we've tried out literally dozens of different concession plans to see which ones were effective and which ones weren't. So we took the actual number of concessions that we've given away, took the dollar amounts that were in those concessions, looked at the rental income that we got, and determined here's the percentage of income that we would lose due to the concessions. Then we looked at the number of move-ins and the stay in months of those particular tenants. And what we found is then we could calculate the cost per move-in. So in this particular column, we ranked them as the most expensive ones down to the least expensive. And over the history, we started off with an average down here of $90.49 of average cost per move-in. And we also have in there just the number of stays in months. At this point, I'd also like to point out something else that we make a mistake in our industry, is that if you look at the number of transfers, the point of a concession, number one, is to get the person to move in. So giving the 7th month free, if that gets them to move in, that's fine. But if they're already in and they're paying 6 months in advance and they're transferring to another unit, why do we need to give the concession again? So you have to look at that. There are sometimes reasons why you want to get more income coming in faster at larger amounts, especially if you have a note to pay off and you're trying to get that taken care of on an interim construction note. But typically we don't continue to give the 7th month free if they prepay 6 months in advance, but use it only for the move-ins as a true move-in concession and not a concession to keep the tenant. Now let me just change the time frame on this, and let's just look at what's happened this year, what we've done for this year. As you'll look, you've noticed that we've gone from $90 down to $40 and used these particular concession plans because we found these to be a lot more cost effective. And overall, we're spending less than half of what we used to spend on our concession plans because we found particular ones worked well for us and they didn't cost as much. Now, I have to say that this is really based on a corporate decision as to the upper management are owners and will have to decide what concession plans they think will work best. And you also have to look at your marketing conditions of what your competition is doing. So every facility is going to be unique on this, but what we say is that you need to do this type of analysis to determine that you're going to be giving away an extreme amount of money on concessions. And so this way you can get these optimized, I would say. I actually overlooked a slide that I'd like to go back to, and that is the one on concessions itself. And what you can do there is typically pick up, by changing your concession plans, another $1,000 to $2,000 a month in excessive concessions, by making them more cost effective. You can review the past tenant concessions and how much was actually given away, as I mentioned. You can look at the ratio of the discount to the total rent received. We rank them, as you saw, and then, as I mentioned before, why give them to people that are just transferring? Now, obviously, if they just moved in and you gave a concession and they transferred over to a larger unit because they found they needed a bigger unit, you'll transfer that concession over there. But I'm just saying, if someone transfers at a later date, a year or two later, there's no reason to give them concession because they're already an existing tenant and they like the location where they're at. One of the things I suggest very strongly is that each month that you match your concession plan at each location for each size and type of unit based on the anticipated vacancy that is desired based on your leasing history. For example, if we decide that at the end of August we want to be 100% occupied in a certain size unit, we can go back and say, what do I need to lease in May, in June, and in July in order to get to my 100% occupancy in that particular size unit. So I can look backwards and using the history to tell me what I might expect. Knowing that might tell me that, okay, I'm not going to hit that at this particular time frame. I might want to actually increase my concessions now, earlier on, so that I can hit the desired goal. We actually have one client, I thought his suggestion was very good. He wanted to look at what his anticipated occupancy was going to be at the end of each month. And so knowing that, he wanted to implement concessions before the end of the month, knowing that he was going to do a lot of leasing right there towards the end of the month. So we set up our system to be able to do that particular thing. So you can even, in the middle of the month, look at it and say, do I need to change my concessions before the end of the month so I can be sure to get those that big boost of leasing that happens towards the end of the month, leasing activity, and increase your leasing activity. The next major area that